Have you ever noticed how the kinder you are, the less people seem to respect you? The more patient you are, the more they test you, ignore you, even use you. You try to be fair, understanding, empathetic, and yet it's like the world reads your kindness as weakness. You can't quite explain it, but you feel it, in the tension when you swallow a comeback, in the silence after someone interrupts you, in the sting of realizing your voice doesn't carry weight. And then you look around. The cold, manipulative, even arrogant people, they're the ones who get respected. They walk into a room and others listen. Not because they're better, but because they know something most don't. Niccolo Machiavelli knew it 5 centuries ago. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Cruel, maybe, but painfully accurate. Because in reality, people don't respond to kindness. They respond to strength. They don't respect promises. They respect boundaries. They don't admire submission. They admire certainty. This isn't about becoming a tyrant or some cold-hearted manipulator. It's about understanding a dark truth of human psychology. Being good isn't enough. If your goodness isn't protected by strength, it's just blood in the water. And sooner or later, the sharks smell it. Maybe you're there right now, tired of being taken for granted. Tired of giving too much and receiving too little. You might even be wondering, how do I make people respect me without turning into someone I hate? How do I stay kind without being weak? That's exactly what we'll uncover here. Because Machiavelli's genius wasn't in teaching cruelty. It was in exposing reality. He understood that in a world driven by interest, respect doesn't come from your heart. It comes from your stance. Here's the first truth. People don't respect good intentions. They respect clear limits. Most people believe that being nice, generous, or self-sacrificing will make others value them. But the human brain doesn't operate on good intentions. It operates on signals, and the strongest signal of all is authority. And authority isn't built on explaining yourself, apologizing, or overgiving. It's built on posture, on the calm, firm energy that says, "Don't cross this line." Psychology has proven it. Fear and respect are linked. The mind pays attention to what it can't control. When you set boundaries, when you speak firmly, and without hesitation, you trigger a very primal instinct in people caution. You're no longer just a person. You're a presence. A field they have to approach carefully. Now think of the opposite. The person who says yes when they mean no. Who over-explains to justify themselves. Who smiles to avoid conflict. They're seen as nice, but the truth, they radiate permission. And wherever there's too much permission, disrespect grows like a weed. Fear and respect are not opposites. They're cousins. Machiavelli wasn't advocating terror. He was describing balance. The kind of quiet fear that keeps people from overstepping. The kind that makes someone think twice before taking advantage of you. It's not about shouting, threatening, or intimidating. That's fake strength. The kind that screams to hide insecurity. Real power is quiet. It's self-control. It's saying no without shaking. It's walking away without announcing it. It's looking someone in the eye and making them realize you don't owe them anything. Machiavelli warned rulers not to be cruel for pleasure, but to be strategic. He said, "People forget favors fast, but they never forget the person who made them hesitate before crossing the line." That principle doesn't just apply to politics. It applies to every part of life, your work, your relationships, your friendships. If you don't set the tone, someone else will, and they'll make it serve them. So no, being good isn't wrong, but being good without strength, that's emotional suicide. Many of us grew up believing that goodness alone was a shield, that if we just treated people right, the universe would reward us. But Machiavelli and modern psychology would tell you the opposite. Kindness without discernment is bait. And predators, yes, they exist, are trained to smell it. They interpret it as access. And before you realize it, you're being drained of energy, respect, and self-worth. You start questioning yourself. Am I too nice? Am I doing something wrong? And the answer is yes. Not because kindness is bad, but because you've weaponized it against yourself. You've confused peace with passivity. That's when you begin to abandon yourself emotionally, saying yes when you want to say no. Staying silent to keep the peace. Letting others take from you so they won't leave. It feels noble, but in reality, it's self-erasure. And the price is brutal. Because once you lose respect for yourself, the world follows your lead. The lesson is not stop being good. The lesson is make your goodness guarded. A kindness that doesn't know how to defend itself isn't virtue. It's naivete. It's the perfect disguise for exploitation. And Machiavelli would call it exactly that. A psychological trap that keeps good people enslaved to the approval of others. The way out begins here. Understand that being respected is not about becoming cruel. It's about becoming clear. It's about learning to say no. To stop explaining why. To hold silence as a weapon. To make your absence a punishment stronger than any argument. Because in the real world, no one respects the person who explains too much. They respect the person who doesn't need to. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into the hidden dilemma of kindness. How to know when your goodness has turned against you, and how to reclaim your strength without losing your soul. Maybe no one ever told you this, being a good person is not enough. You were raised on the idea that empathy and selflessness would bring you love and stability. Do the right thing, they said, and the world will do right by you. But what happens when the world doesn't? What happens when you realize that your goodness has turned you into everyone's emotional servant? That's where most people break. Because when your kindness starts to hurt you, you face a brutal question. If I stop being this way, am I still a good person? It's a psychological trap, one that keeps gentle souls enslaved to manipulation. You've been taught that soft equals moral and boundaries equal cruelty. But Machiavelli would tell you something radical. There is no true kindness without strength. A heart that can't defend itself is not noble, it's naive. And naivete in this world is blood in the water. Think about it every time you let someone talk over you. Every time you apologize for having needs. Every time you excuse disrespect because you don't want conflict. You reinforce one message. My peace is less important than their comfort. Psychologists call this self-abandonment, the act of betraying yourself in the name of harmony. You shrink, you adapt, you explain, until the reflection in the mirror doesn't even look like you anymore. And the cruel irony? The more you sacrifice yourself for others, the less they respect you. Because the human brain doesn't admire sacrifice, it exploits it. That's what Machiavelli understood centuries ago. He didn't glorify cruelty. He exposed human nature. People respect those who protect their energy, who set limits, who know how to disappear. They may not always like those people, but they remember them. You've probably noticed this too. The people who demand respect get it. The ones who don't spend their lives chasing it. And here lies the core dilemma. How do you become respected without turning into someone cold or hateful? How do you stay kind, yet untouchable? The answer is presence calm, unwavering presence. Machiavelli wrote that a prince should make himself feared in such a way that if he is not loved, at least he is not hated. In modern terms, that means learning balance. Being firm enough that people don't cross you, but fair enough that they don't wish to see you fall. Because fear alone breeds rebellion. Love alone breeds dependency. But respect is the perfect balance between the two. Respect comes when your words carry weight, when your silence means something, when your absence leaves a mark. That kind of respect is not built overnight. It's built through small, repeated acts of self-command, saying no without flinching, walking away without guilt, keeping your energy sacred. Psychologists call this latent power, the type of authority that exists even when you're not using it. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't even have to explain. People feel it. They sense the boundaries you've built, and instinctively, they tread carefully. Think about the opposite. The person who's always available, always forgiving, always quick to laugh off an insult. People don't fear losing them. And what isn't feared isn't respected. Machiavelli wasn't wrong when he said it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Because love is fragile. It's conditional. It evaporates the moment you stop giving what people expect. Fear, when properly measured, endures. It makes people think twice before taking advantage. Fear, in this sense, isn't terror. It's structure. It's the silent realization that you are not to be crossed. But here's where most go wrong. They mistake aggression for authority. They start shouting, controlling, punishing. They think fear must be loud. It doesn't. In fact, the loudest ones are usually the weakest. Real authority is quiet. It's the kind of presence that says, "You may not like me, but you will not disrespect me." So how do you build it? You start with clarity. Stop giving endless explanations to people who already know they're crossing the line. Stop smiling when something offends you. Stop justifying your boundaries as if they're requests. Every time you over-explain, you weaken the frame. You teach people that your limits are negotiable. Instead, let your silence carry the message. Silence is unsettling. It forces others to face themselves. If someone disrespects you, don't argue. Don't seek revenge. Simply withdraw. Detach your warmth. Make them feel your absence. It's not punishment, it's equilibrium. In politics, Machiavelli warned that rulers who were too merciful invited rebellion. In personal life, it's no different. Excessive tolerance breeds abuse. But if you hold your ground with quiet confidence, if you don't chase, don't explain, don't bend, people adapt. They begin to calibrate themselves to your presence. That's the secret to being feared without being hated. People might whisper, "I wouldn't mess with them," but they'll also add, "They're fair." And that's the perfect balance strength that commands respect, combined with fairness that commands admiration. Still, for many, this shift feels unnatural, because you've been conditioned since childhood to please to keep the peace, to avoid being seen as rude or difficult. You were told that confrontation equals conflict, that saying no equals rejection, that silence equals guilt. And so, you've built your personality around keeping everyone comfortable except yourself. But the truth is, that comfort came at the cost of your power. Machiavelli saw this dynamic centuries ago. He studied kings, soldiers, priests, and realized something eternal. Those who cannot command themselves will always be commanded by others. Your task now is to reverse that dynamic, to stop playing the servant of perception and become the architect of respect. Because respect, once built, doesn't require constant defense. It sustains itself. It protects you. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the heart of this transformation, inside the psychological war between your old identity and the one you're becoming. You'll see how to break free from the need for validation, rebuild your inner authority, and finally embody the kind of strength that no one dares to test. Let's go even deeper because by now you understand the logic. You see that kindness without boundaries is a trap. That respect isn't given to those who please, but to those who lead themselves. Yet even when you grasp this intellectually, something inside still resists. That resistance, the guilt, the hesitation, the fear of being seen as cold, that's not weakness, it's programming. Since childhood, many of us were trained to equate love with approval. You learned that to be loved, you had to be good. To be safe, you had to be nice. To be accepted, you had to be agreeable. Every time you said no as a child, someone punished you through anger, guilt, or silence. So you learned the rule. It's safer to please than to displease. But here's the tragedy: that rule might have protected you then, but it destroys you now. Because the adult world doesn't reward compliance, it consumes it. And the people around you, whether they mean to or not, will take as much as you allow. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He lived among betrayal, false loyalty, and manipulation. He saw how the most moral leaders often fell because they refused to see human nature for what it is: self-interested, volatile, and easily swayed by strength. He warned, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. They shun danger and are greedy for gain." That's not cynicism. It's diagnosis. And that diagnosis applies to modern life too. The colleague who uses your silence to dominate the meeting. The partner who tests your limits just to see if you'll react. The friend who only calls when they need something. If you've been wondering why you keep attracting these dynamics, it's because people subconsciously sense what you're willing to tolerate. The energy of "I'll understand" invites testing. The energy of "don't try me" commands respect. This shift begins not in your words, but in your posture, psychological posture. Ask yourself, where do I still betray myself? Who do I over-explain to, hoping they'll finally get me? Where do I pretend to be fine just to avoid discomfort? In what moments do I choose peace over self-respect? Each time you do that, you send the same signal Machiavelli warned against, that you're safe to exploit. And the more you repeat that pattern, the deeper it roots in others' minds. So what do? You dismantle it piece by piece. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. When someone crosses the line, stop explaining why it hurt. Stop trying to make them understand your perspective. Just enforce the boundary through action. Withdraw your energy, your time, your presence. That's how you teach the world how to treat you, not through words, but through what you no longer allow. And yes, people will notice. Some will say you've changed. They'll call you distant, arrogant, even cruel. But what they're really saying is, "I can't control you anymore." That's the real reason they're uncomfortable, because your silence exposes their dependency. Every time you stop participating in your own exploitation, someone will take it personally. Let them. That's the price of freedom. Machiavelli never said to be ruthless for pleasure. He said to be strategic for survival. And that's what this is: emotional strategy. You're not trying to dominate people. You're simply reclaiming your leverage. You're teaching others through calm consistency that your respect is not free. And yes, you will lose people along the way. Friends who loved your compliance will disappear. Co-workers who thrived on your availability will turn cold. Family members who relied on your endless forgiveness will call you selfish. But understand this: losing people who only valued your obedience is not loss, it's liberation. Because the moment you stop chasing love and start demanding respect, everything shifts. People begin to sense something new in your energy. Scarcity. You are no longer easily available. And scarcity, as Machiavelli and modern psychology both confirm, creates value. You become someone who no longer begs to be heard. You're simply listened to. Your boundaries, once mocked, become the perimeter of your power. Your silence, once seen as weakness, becomes the atmosphere of authority. People start to weigh their words around you, not because they fear punishment, but because they respect your calm. You've shifted from seeking validation to projecting certainty, and that certainty rewires every interaction. But let's go further, because there's still a risk. One that Machiavelli himself warned against. When you first taste strength, you might swing to the other extreme, mistaking control for power. You start to harden. You become defensive, suspicious, even cynical. You might feel invincible for a while, but deep down, you'll sense the cost. Isolation. That's not the goal. Machiavelli warned rulers to avoid being hated at all costs. The same is true for you. Power is not cruelty. It's composure. The balance lies here. Be so firm that people hesitate to cross you, but so fair that they never want to. That's the art of psychological authority, being feared enough to be respected, but respected enough to be followed. And it's not built in grand gestures. It's built in micro decisions, saying no when it's inconvenient, leaving messages unanswered when they don't deserve your time, walking away without guilt when your peace is being taxed. Each act reinforces your sovereignty, and soon you'll notice the shift. People stop testing you. Conversations change tone. Even your silence begins to carry gravity. You've built what Machiavelli called a fortress within. But here's the final piece of this transformation, and it's the hardest one. You must face the fear that keeps you small, the fear of rejection. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear that your boundaries will cost you love. Because until you face that, you'll always flinch when you should stand firm. In the next part, we'll uncover how that fear formed, how your emotional history trained you to please, and how to dismantle that conditioning forever. You'll see exactly how to reprogram your mind for authority, and how to make respect your default state. Not through dominance, but through discipline. Let's talk about where it all begins, not in the world, but inside you. Because even after you learn to set boundaries, part of you still hesitates. That voice in your head whispers, "What if they think I'm selfish? What if they leave?" That voice isn't reason. It's conditioning. You were taught to survive by pleasing. As a child, you learned that saying no could bring punishment, rejection, or silence. So you adapted. You became agreeable, quiet, easy to love, at the cost of being easy to use. And that pattern followed you into adulthood. Every time you felt fear of disappointing someone, you gave more. Every time you felt unworthy, you overcompensated with kindness. Every time you felt conflict rising, you silenced yourself, thinking peace was more important than truth. But Machiavelli would tell you, the moment you prioritize approval over respect, you've already surrendered your power. This isn't about blaming your past. It's about realizing how deeply you've been trained to serve other people's comfort at the expense of your dignity. That's not compassion, that's programming, and it must be broken. Because if you don't unlearn that script, you'll keep attracting the same disrespect in different forms. Bosses who take advantage, friends who drain you, partners who only value you when you're silent. The antidote isn't rage, it's reprogramming. Every time you feel that reflex to explain yourself, to over-apologize, to make peace pause. Breathe. Let the silence stretch. You'll feel the tension rise in you and in them. But that's the tension of transformation. That's the sound of your old self dying. You have to teach your nervous system that conflict isn't danger, that saying no isn't betrayal, that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're clarity. Because respect doesn't start with how others treat you. It starts with how you treat yourself when others test you. And here's the paradox Machiavelli understood. Those who seek constant approval never get it. The moment you stop chasing it, the world adjusts. People begin to sense something different about you: stillness. You're no longer reactive. You're not performing. You've become unreadable, and unreadable people are dangerous in the best way. When others can't predict you, they tread carefully. They weigh their words. They pause before testing you. That pause, that hesitation, is where your power lives. Machiavelli called this strategic fear, not the fear that you create by force, but the quiet, psychological respect that arises when people sense that crossing you has consequences. And you don't need to threaten anyone. You just need to live in such a way that disrespect costs access. Someone mocks you once they lose warmth. Someone lies, they lose your time. Someone manipulates, they lose your presence. No speech, no revenge. Just removal. That's the discipline of power. And something fascinating happens when you begin living like this. You stop being angry, because anger comes from helplessness. Once you realize you can withdraw at any moment, you stop trying to control others. You simply decide who earns proximity. That's how true strength feels: calm, measured, detached. Psychologists call this earned authority. You're no longer forcing respect through control. You're commanding it through consistency. And soon, your energy begins to speak louder than your words. People notice it before you even open your mouth. The way you carry yourself, the way you pause before responding, the way your eyes hold still. It all tells the world, I don't need to prove anything. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said, it's safer to be feared than loved. He didn't mean terrorize people. He meant become the kind of person others hesitate to disrespect, not because they fear your wrath, but because they sense your absence would cost them something. So ask yourself now, what would your life look like if every time someone tested you, you responded not with emotion, but with precision, not with arguments, but with silence? The moment you start living like that, everything changes. You no longer chase fairness, you create it. You no longer beg to be valued, you embody value. And slowly, the world begins to treat you the way you treat yourself, with weight, with space, with care. This is what Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Respect is not granted by others. It's trained through your posture, your restraint, and your silence. Because the truth is simple. People remember the one who didn't flinch. They respect the one who didn't react. They adjust to the one who never explains. And when that becomes you, you'll never be disrespected again. There comes a decisive moment in everyone's life when you finally stop hoping people will see your worth and start behaving like someone who already knows it. That moment changes everything. Because from then on, respect stops being something you chase. It becomes something you radiate. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He saw that the world doesn't reward goodness in silence. It rewards presence, composure, and control. He wrote that, love is preserved by the link of obligation, but fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. In simple terms, people's affection is temporary, but their respect for your boundaries, if clearly enforced, lasts. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or detached. It means mastering the one thing most people never do: yourself. Because the person who governs their emotions, who speaks only when necessary, who doesn't over-explain or overreact, that person commands the room without ever asking for it. So, how do you get there? You stop negotiating your self-worth. Every time you over-apologize to keep the peace, you teach others that your peace doesn't matter. Every time you explain your boundaries twice, you signal they're flexible. Every time you let a small disrespect slide, you train others to push further next time. Respect is not requested. It's required through action, through stillness, through the calm certainty that you will not tolerate less than what you give. When you reach that state, something profound shifts. You stop talking about self-respect. You start embodying it. People feel it in your silence, in your eyes, in your timing. You no longer rush to fill awkward pauses or justify your decisions. You simply exist with gravity. And that gravity is what Machiavelli called the unseen fortress. A stronghold not made of walls, but of awareness. When people sense that your approval isn't easy to earn, they start treating it like gold. Your attention becomes valuable. Your absence becomes expensive. That's real power, not dominance over others, but dominion over yourself. You'll start to notice it everywhere. Conversations change tone. People listen longer. The same voices that once talked over you will now measure their words, and you'll realize something beautiful. You didn't have to raise your voice. You just had to raise your standard. This is what Machiavelli meant by strategic fear. It's not terror or cruelty. It's clarity. It's the quiet understanding that crossing you has consequences, not because you punish, but because you withdraw. Your silence becomes the boundary that no one wants to test twice. And this balance between warmth and restraint, between kindness and consequence, is what separates the respected from the ignored. But here's the paradox. Once you learn this, you no longer need to prove it. The truly powerful never announce they are powerful. Their presence speaks for them. Their words are few, but each one lands with weight. They don't chase opportunities, people, or approval. Everything begins to align around them. That's the level Machiavelli was pointing toward, self-command. You don't have to stop being good. You just have to stop being available for those who mistake goodness for weakness. You can still love deeply, but never at the cost of your dignity. You can still forgive, but never twice for the same mistake. You can still help, but only those who value your effort. Because real kindness is not blind. It's disciplined. When you become this version of yourself, calm, deliberate, sovereign people change their tone around you. The loud grow quieter, grow. The manipulative grow nervous. The disrespectful vanish. Not because you've threatened them, but because your energy no longer entertains what dishonors it. And that's the final lesson Machiavelli would leave you with. Power doesn't always need to strike. Sometimes it just needs to stand still. So from this moment on, stop explaining your worth. Live it. Stop proving you deserve respect. Embody it. Stop waiting for people to value you. Walk in a way that makes it impossible for them not to. Because once you master this, once your silence has weight, your words have intention, and your kindness has limits, you'll never be disrespected again. Not because you demanded respect, but because you became the kind of person who makes disrespect unthinkable.